So just a simple example of basic rotational movement in midfield to allow for a free player to get on the ball when we're trying to play it from the back. So we're working with the red team, and we've just set up in the formation shown. So it's a 1-4-3-3 versus a 1-4-3-3. But the main aspect is that we've got a 3v3 in midfield here. And how do we create space for players to be able to get on the ball and affect the game? If we look at how we've set up, we've kept the full backs, so the 2 and 3 in the red team, quite high and wide to affect the 7 and 11. And this is to isolate the number 9, the lone striker, against the goalkeeper and the 6 and the 5 to make it a 3v1 effectively. But when playing out, certainly a choice of a 2v1. And then what we're trying to do is we're trying to show and display rotational movement in midfield that's going to allow you to free up a player on the pitch to be able to get on the ball, and then we'll look at some variations. So if we look to visualize that on the pitch, we can see that we've got our goalkeeper here, and this is what they're going to see. So they can choose to go to the left or to the right, to the 5 and 6, as we've got this lone striker, based on our 3 occupying the blue 7, our red 2 occupying the blue 11. So we're going to choose to go out to the 6 to show this rotational movement. So the ball's played out to the 6. Now, because we've isolated these players and kept them almost high, a little bit deeper, because our 2 and 3 are a little bit higher and wider, this allows to create this space in here that we're going to try and step into. But essentially, we're not looking to take up too much of the space in front, because we want to try and get a midfielder, an influential player on the ball to be able to play forward. Plus, we're going to be closed down by the 9. So as this is happening, we can see the 6 move forward into the space, but still being closed down. Now, what's happened is we've just seen the 4 vacate the space in midfield, and that's allowed for the 10 to get on the ball. So if we go back and just see that, so the ball's been played to the red 6. Now, if we look at the movement of the 4, we can see the 4 has vacated this space in here, and that's allowed for the 10 to move into that space and create a yard. Now, it's really important that we understand the specific details of the movement. So what we're not saying is, we're not saying the 4 is going to run and replace the 10, because a good team and with good players who've got good communication skills, so if I look at the 8 in this picture, if the 4 tries to just replace the position of the 10, then it's going to be pretty easy for me to combat that, because I would just pass on information as the defender to my blue 10 and say, just take the runner. So then the blue 10 would be looking over their shoulder as the runner's coming, then they'd be able to take up that space. Okay, and that's why when we look at this position, we look at the 4 actually going in a straight line. So again, if we look at it, you can see I want to vacate this space, and I'm going to move into that area, and by doing that, it allows for the red 10 to be able to take that space and get a little bit of a half a yard. Now, you might look at this and say, okay, it's still quite challenging, because depending on how good the 8 is physically and how switched on they are to be able to get tight to the 10, that's going to be really important, which is why then you need to think about what's next. So when we look at this situation again of this movement, we notice the part on the periphery almost that the 8 is playing. So the 8 needs to also play a part in this and create as much space as possible for the 10 to come into. Now, thinking about how you would coach this to players, think about references and triggers. So the ball's gone to the right hand side, the red 6, and that means then I, as the number 8, the red 8, I'm almost on the same side as the 6, so I have a certain role to fill. If the ball goes and starts with the red 5, then I will be the furthest away of the midfielders, so my role will be different, i.e. I'd be taking up the role of the 10 in this instance. So if we look at the red 8, we can see that they've stepped away from the game, created a little bit more space. I know there's space for this player to run into, but if they're being closed down, that's going to be quite challenging. But left a lot of space for the 10 to be able to play with. Now then, if we go to the right central defender, what sort of pass am I giving here? This is where the specific details come in. So by playing the ball into an area there, it allows for my teammate who's had the space created for them to step in to that space there. And then now look, I've got this a few yards of space now, and I've been able to then create a little area here where I can start to play. So sometimes we get caught up in thinking that when we play in, we've got to switch the play and do that. And that's great, yeah, if we can do that. But certainly within a 3v3 in midfield, that's going to be really challenging. If you're 3v2-4, i.e. you've got one extra player, then that is going to be, it stands to reason that's going to be much easier to do because you've got an extra player. But when you've got a 3v3 in midfield, that's going to be really challenging. So there's nothing wrong with continuing to play on this side based on having good specific detail on the passes that you're playing. And then now that we can see, if we go around this side, we can see how this affects this side of the pitch, where we're now, when we based on our 1-2-3 player rule, we've now got opportunities to exploit on the blind side as this play is progressing. And then if we go to the side that we're playing on, we can see little variations. Okay, we've got the 7 that's created some space. So if we look at how the 7's movement has been affected. So we've created this space in here. It's allowed for the pass to be played. I'm going to utilize that to come off the blind side of the 3 to create space. And then looking at how I can play a 2v2, 2v1 with my player, with my teammate here. Now, if the player comes tight, then we can look at other variations. The red 9 making a run and then getting the ball in behind. So again, what we're thinking about here is how do we create the movement to get the player on the ball? And then we've looked at some variations of passes we can play. Don't see this as one whole scenario and situation in terms of there's a few phases within this. The phase that we wanted to focus on is how do we get a free player here to start doing stuff with the ball. And by having that movement of that rotation of the 4 moving in a straight line, because that's the shortest distance to get to their destination, so it takes less time. And also it means that we're not just crossing the paths of defenders where they can easily pass attacking players on. So I'm actually taking this player into a new area. So from no space into space. And then likewise bringing the 10 into the area that we vacated. Then we look at the detail on the pass to play a safe side. So then the 10 has opportunities to start progressing the game here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 players. We can play a bounce pass. We can play a pass into space. If that player is tight, we might get an overlapping run from the red 2. We'll get the 9 spinning off the outside shoulder of the 5. So that's a completely different phase, and that then requires the player to be adaptable based on what they see. I.e., when we just shown the example of the 7 space, can receive the ball and turn and go forward, great, no problem. No space, have to think about something different. But see those as different phases within this whole scenario of how we get from here to potentially here.